All right, welcome to episode 4 of Coach Connect. I'm Diego Salinas, the podcast host and proud co-founder of Vibely. And we're really excited for today's episode for Sonia Eklund. Sonia is a board-certified health and wellness coach. She's a financial social work coach and has learning and development professional with 13 years of experience. Helping people change their lives through the power of coaching, consulting, and education. She's highly passionate about mentoring and empowering coaches to build skills they need to have a purposeful career as a coach. She provides high-quality continuing education that's board approved to coaches that fosters professional growth and development, helping to establish the credibility of the coaching profession and allow coaches to learn more about themselves along the way. Sonia, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Sonia, maybe get started. Curious about kind of how you entered coaching, which is long career, 13 years so far. Kind of what got you interested in coaching and something you learned on the way during your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to be a cardiac surgeon from the time that I was pretty little. And I was really passionate about, going to medical school and becoming a doctor and kind of just working on hearts all day. And I really thought that's what I was meant to do. And I really thought that's what I was going to do. And I'm pretty bad at math. And so I got redirected on my path, and just kind of realized that, medical school was within reach for me, but it just was maybe going to be a hard path that possibly was not really what I wanted to do. And so I remember being like 18 years old, and my mom and I had a conversation where she said, "You love to talk way too much to work on anesthetized patients all day. And I don't think being a heart surgeon is the right career path for you." And so it was really like that and how much I struggled with math that just kind of made me realize, like, yeah, I need to pick a different path. And around the same time I learned about coaching, and I just remember like learning about, all of the different ways that coaching combines health and health education and health literacy and health outcomes with behavior change and motivational interviewing and positive psychology and social support and all kinds of cool things. And I just was like, this is what I'm meant to do. So I pivoted into that, studied health and psychology, and my graduation present from college was to go to the National Wellness Institute's conference and to get my first coaching certification. So I did that in 2011 and have been in the industry ever since.
And what dedication there, right? Your present for graduation was more education,
Yeah,
right? Clearly, your
exactly.
passion is there. And Sonia, I definitely, to be honest with you, I went to medical school, but during surgery, I was thinking about that because I'm a tinkerer. I work with my hands. I had the same thing you think. I was like, everyone's sleeping. We can't talk to them. We can't help them out,
Right,
right? And
exactly.
so, as we all know here from coaches, that the missing part of our healthcare landscape really is that integration, behavior change. What happens
Mhm.
after the hospital, or to prevent people from getting into the hospital. So Sonia, so you left college, decided to go on this new adventure after graduation, and curious what you learned along the way, maybe early on, what you saw in the early part of your career and how that started developing.
Yeah. I mean, in the early part of my career, I just boldly started a private practice. I was, 22. I had just finished a service term with AmeriCorps. I had, yeah, about a year after completing my certifications, and I just was like, I'm ready to go into private practice and start this on my own. And, on one hand, I was ready. I really built something kind of cool in the small town I was living in, and on the other hand, I was very new. I was very new and very young, and it was really challenging to build a private practice at the age of 22 in a small town. And so I had a chapter of my life where I worked about 6 jobs, and one of those jobs was being a health and wellness coach. And another one was teaching yoga. And then I kind of supplemented all that with a few other jobs. But I have always kept my side hustle alive. So even as I, moved out of that small town, moved to Minneapolis, and started my career in corporate wellness, I've always kept a side hustle and a private practice on my own. And I fully went into private practice just at the beginning of this year.
Oh, so that's with your long career history you've had. I think something that I see and I tell new coaches about, that the coaching profession as a job, it waxes and wanes, right? I
Hmm.
say, January 1st, people want to get a coach.
Oh, yeah.
Those resolutions, right? July 1st, people are on vacation, and
Hmm.
they did having this side hustle always there and starting. And I wonder if we can maybe explore some of those. That's one thing we're trying to do here, Bobby. How to help people start, but also maintain that side hustle. Because in my
Definitely.
experience, sometimes I'd find people, you never knew where that new client was going to be, and if I wasn't
Hmm.
ready, I definitely lost the potential leads, right? It's like sending them a call, email later. And my recommendation to all coaches, no matter what platform they use, is you have to be ready first, right? Think about a
Hmm.
store. You have to have a storefront for people to walk in. People sometimes say, well, I'll start once I get clients. And I've tried that, and after I meet someone to try to get things ready, and I've lost that connection. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit your experience and, getting started and the importance of having that always availability and things that you learned that maybe you wish were there back then and that we're doing now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I was so excited when I first encountered Vibely was like that it's everything I wish I had had 13 years ago when I did start my own private practice. And I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of power in really sitting down and thinking about who you serve, what you
Mm,
do, what products and services you offer, and how you can differentiate yourself from other coaches in the marketplace. And I think that what's really amazing about Vibely is it offers an opportunity to people who are both fully established in their practices, but also brand new in their practices to think about those things and create their own statements in a really like cohesive and concise way. And I love the fact that Vibely has really identified like those top business questions that a person needs to identify in order to kind of hang up their shingle and start their practice. And that is everything I wish I had had, many years ago in my side hustle life.
yeah. And I want to give Jad, my co-founder, a lot of credit here because even when I signed on, I was like, oh yeah, these are the questions everyone's asking me. I know I
Yeah.
can be very expansive in my thinking and I'm so passionate. A lot of coaches are. We can do everything. We can do all these things, but sometimes that gets lost in translation when you're talking to someone. I would see the blank stares on their face when I rambling on about all these possibilities I could do, and really kind of, again, Jad did a great job of organizing what are the things clients want because he is a client,
Hmm.
and kind of having that framework. And I've also seen my own practice. I'm curious with your experience too, how the things that you work on might change over time. New opportunities come in. You might work in with different populations and say, oh, maybe I want to start also serving this kind of group, or I maybe learn some new, went to school again and have a new skill set, and now there's a new opportunity for me to help people in a way I didn't see further. So could you explain kind of maybe what you've seen in your 13 years and maybe how you transitioned or changed having always that side hustle on the side?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I first got started, I was pretty much focused solely on physical health. I was focused on a lot of things related to nutrition. I was really passionate about nutrition. I still am, of course, but I was really thinking that that was going to be the focus of my private practice. Certainly, as a yoga teacher as well, I was focused on helping people feel good in their bodies, helping people develop mindful relationships with food, things like that. And now those are two things I really don't do in my private practice these days. And so I think for me, it was like that's where I got my start. That's what I was really passionate about when I first entered the industry. Then I pivoted into working in corporate wellness. And while I worked there for 7.5 years, I had thousands and thousands of conversations with people about everything. I mean, literally any topic you can think of. We used to play like coaching bingo and talk about like what topics have come up. And it's like everything has come up when you've had
Yeah.
that many conversations in that kind of setting. But definitely a lot of conversations focused around health outcomes related to diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, things like that. But something I noticed as I was coaching in that corporate environment in 15 to 30-minute coaching conversations was that it was almost never about those things. Someone would come to the conversation wanting to talk about their blood pressure, but really we needed to talk about the stress of their roommate, who was
Mm,
like leaving dishes by the sink or something that was really just bothering them. And so a lot of times what we were exploring was like helpful strategies to help that person figure out how to change their own emotional reaction to the situation, but also developing communication skills and thinking about
mm,
interpersonal skills and relationship skills. And that's where I really started to kind of hone my own skills as a coach. And so now I really focus my private practice on five things. I talk to people about purpose, money, career, relationships, and life after loss. And
mm.
certainly, if somebody is also navigating a diagnosis of diabetes, I'm more than happy to walk alongside them in that journey. But those five topics are really kind of the things that differentiate me as a coach.
Yeah, you bring a great point that I think what separates coaching from other health professions is that the whole person integration, right?
Yeah.
Because people often come in for a particular thing. Let's say a common topic of weight loss, right? What do most other paradigms see? It's like, well, calories in, calories out, these strategies. But we know the what to do isn't the hard part always. It's the how and the why. And there's always so much more behind that, right? You can't talk
Mhm.
about a weight loss journey without talking about emotional, whether people feel uh, embarrassment, shame, guilt, or wow, how did I let myself go for this long? Or people who smoke cessation. It's a
Mhm.
it activates your parasympathetic, your relaxed nervous system. So how can you talk about that without talking about stress management? I think that's where other paradigms kind of fall short. And even in medicine, the more I went into it, I first wanted to be an endocrinologist, a nephrologist, really nitty gritty detail. But the more I studied, I wanted to integrate everything, right?
Mhm.
Because I would see specialists kind of argue about, well, this is bad for the heart, this is bad for the kidney. And I'm like, the patient has both,
Right.
right? How are we going to make a choice there? And that really,
Yeah.
I felt in the clinic, it was lacking that whole person integration, right? And that what's behind there. And I think that's really the different as a coach. You start with one area, but you do have to be able to help people navigate how they're integrating and those different parts. So the more skill sets we have, the more we can help them on those things, but also know when we need extra support as well and how we can learn more throughout our whole career.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it's really cool that, when I see coaches who are sort of new to the field and sitting for their board exam and thinking about what their specialty is going to be, oftentimes they have a really specific idea of what that's going to look like. And I
Mm.
always encourage people to go for it, try it out, see what it looks like to specialize in a particular area, but also maybe stay open minded to the fact that it might not stay that way. I definitely wouldn't have predicted that I would have conversations focused around building life after loss. That's not something I
Mm.
ever thought I was going to do when I first got my coaching certifications, but that's an area that I feel, is obviously important for people to be able to talk about and to have a space to go to that kind of exists outside of the therapeutic scope and exists more in like figuring out what their life is going to look like in the wake of a significant loss. And that's just not something that I would have predicted coaching on in the beginning. So I always encourage people to stay open minded to just seeing where your coaching journey takes you.
Yeah. As you mentioned, working with loss, and sometimes I think about coaching. It's not just what you're running away from, but what you're working towards.
Hmm.
It's not that I just want to lose weight, but I want to be happier, more fulfilled, have more energy. Not that I just want to be sad, but I want to be fulfilled and have purpose again. Right? Not that I don't want to be struggling financially. I want to be able to enjoy myself and go on vacation the way I want to go. Right? It's more
Yeah.
about the not what you're running away from, but really what you're working towards. And as you mentioned, your advice to new coaches, I used to give that in medicine too. People say, what should I specialize in? I was like, only you're gonna know by
Hmm.
trying it out. And
Hmm.
then that real world experience. There's so much that goes into it. Each population, each clientele has a different feel, different interest, and ours might change too, right? And I think the nice
Right.
about coaching is that you can adapt. And that might maybe transition us to talk about coaching education because
Yeah.
this year I was really fortunate enough to work with the boards to help update the blueprint. For those who don't know, the
Hmm.
blueprint is basically what the exam is based off of, but also what the program accreditation is based off of. We're going to have a different podcast talking more about that. But what I realized is that's the information or the knowledge and skill set of foundational knowledge and skill set for a coach to learn.
Hmm.
But as we know, part of our code of ethics is we'll always be learning, right? We have
Yes.
to have 36 continuing education credits and just we are always progressing too. And I wonder if you can talk about what that was like me for you going through that early part of the career. And it sounds like you've definitely continued on more. If you can maybe walk through that transition, because for some people who haven't taken these big exams,
Hmm.
I know coaches who's worked for 5 years and like, oh, I'm afraid of the exam and I
Yeah.
don't know. And I realized I came from this background where I would take 2-day exams. So I was like, okay, it's
Hmm.
possible. But not everyone has that previous experience. So I'm curious if you can share your experience too. And speaking of questions, one last thing I'll say, anyone who's watching, feel free to add any questions to the chat. So the last, a couple of minutes, we can answer any questions you may have. So Sonia, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things I want to address from there. I think the first thing is that when the first board exam happened in fall of 2017, this was like the highest credentialing standard out there, right? It was like the thing that differentiated you from just coach to board certified coach, and it was really, really exciting, and it still is. But there are many, many board certified coaches now, and like we've talked about, Diego, it's sort of like it used to be the ceiling, and now it's sort of the floor. It's sort of the foundation,
Mm,
sort of like, becoming a board certified coach is what you need to actually enter the industry with credibility. It used to be the thing that kind of set you apart and gave you this extra level of credibility. And now it's like, if you want to be a part of the industry at all, you need to be board certified. And so I think it's really cool that the industry has gotten there in such a short period of time, too. And the fact that I can't remember if it's 10 or 11,000 board certified coaches that are out there now, which is just amazing. But I think, something we've talked about is that it is the foundation that you need as a coach. You need to fully understand the current four areas of the content outline, and being really like well versed in each and every one of those things and being able to pass the exam is the thing that kind of unlocks your ability to enter the coaching industry and get jobs and get clients.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you also want to throw a shout out to our coaching friends from the ICF community too, because they also
absolutely.
we will have coaches on from there as well and explain that. But I do think that standardization, and
Mm-hmm.
both organizations have done studies. Clients
Mm-hmm.
want people who are certified and vetted, because I think there's this misconception of what coaching is, and frankly, I was definitely unaware what it was till my first day of my program. I thought, oh, it's just teaching, or some version of giving advice or giving information, right? And we know it's
Yes.
much deeper than that. And so part of this podcast goal is to help raise that awareness. And if I can share a personal story, all my friends from residency and medicine, I was telling what I was doing. Oh, it's so exciting, so great. When I told them you can be board certified in this, and for people who don't know, so when your doctor or dentist or nurse is board certified, that comes from the NBME, the National Board of Medical Examiners. They set these exams up that certifies someone to be board certified. So, like Sonia was saying, because of the hard work of many dedicated people, lots of research showing the overwhelming efficacy of coaching and behavior change, which is what most of our morbidity, mortality, expenditure on is in healthcare. Right. So clearly, healthcare wasn't addressing those things well. They said so much overwhelming evidence that this should be part of that organization, and that's where the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches came in. They're a nonprofit arm of the NBME. And so we mentioned that now we have that language that for clients, potential clients, that, hey, I'm also a board certified coach. As my dad says, it shows you the homework. You're willing to do the standardization. But also for other healthcare providers, if we say, hey, try to link up with your local health network, if you have that same language, hey, I'm also a board certified coach. I got my certificate from the MBME, and I use a HIPAA compliant platform. Okay. And the story for me is even my dear friends who, some of my best friends, when I told them I became board certified, they're like, board what? And I was like, where's the
Mm-hmm.
excitement last year when I was saying I was studying for this, right? So, so even those who know you well, it really does help the profession up from, and I'm going to say this, I want to be very cautious how I say this, but a lot of people, especially in the pandemic, have become a coach.
Mm-hmm.
They say they're a coach, right? I love people, I'm a coach. And I believe they do love people. I love people too. That's why I became a doctor. Even medicine didn't teach me anything about coaching. I had one lecture on motion interviewing in 7 years post grad. And my analogy here is I love my dog. Doesn't make me a vet. Loving people doesn't make you a coach. Now, it can give you the passion to drive to study. And if you then take these evidence-based approaches through and add your own creativity through that lens, I think that's where the magic of coaching is, the creativity, allowing people to work the way they want to work. Almost the way you mentioned the things you work in, Sonia. In a hospital is different kind of specialist. There's radiologists, cardiologists, and same. I want people to know this coaching has a wide range, because we as coaches have a wide range of experiences and passions too, and that can really show up in our work, so we can have a best alliance with our clients, which is the best predictor of results at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, one thing we had this talk before, I'm lucky to know Sonia from earlier, and we talked this idea of imposterization, which was actually, she informed me of this because I used to call it imposter syndrome, but I really appreciate the difference there and nuance. And I hear a lot of people that I train or that I work with say, oh, but I'm not a doctor like you. I can't be a coach. I feel, and they're amazing coaches. I see them work. I see how passionate they are. I really try to encourage them that you don't have to be a doctor to be an amazing coach. Most doctors are really bad coaches, actually. The different skill set. So I'm wondering if you could maybe clarify for people that thing you clarified for me, imposterization versus imposter syndrome, and how you've seen it with people you've helped into your education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome in general in the world, but certainly within the industry of coaching, a lot of people feel like imposters because it's like, if I don't have my entire life figured out, how can I possibly help others? I think that's the fundamental question that coaches start asking themselves when they start to experience some level of imposter syndrome. And I see this pop up when people are sitting for the board exam. They think, I can't possibly pass a test like that. They start wondering if they're smart enough. They start wondering what it will mean about them if they don't pass the test. They'll start,
Mm,
kind of wondering, yeah, if they can build a meaningful career as a coach, if anybody's going to want their services. And so all of those kind of like loud imposter syndrome stories are very prevalent and prominent. And in the time that I was a coach training professional for a board approved training program, this was something we addressed on day one of training, that like you might experience imposter syndrome stories pop up throughout this training experience. You're here learning something new, and that can be really humbling. And humility and imposter syndrome are not the same thing. But if you
mm,
do notice imposter syndrome kind of popping up for you, um, just know that it's okay to name that and to talk about it, and for us to kind of work through that together. But what I talked to you about, Diego, was kind of this distinction between imposter syndrome and imposterization. And so imposterization is a new term for a lot of people. And the terms are really similar. They kind of get at that same feeling of like wondering if you're good enough, wondering if you belong. But imposter syndrome kind of places the blame and the burden and the responsibility of imposter syndrome feelings on the individual person experiencing it. Like I, would say Diego's experiencing imposter syndrome right now, right? And that means that it's an experience he's having in isolation, alone, something that just relates to him. And imposterization takes a look at the bigger picture. So it recognizes that there are a lot of systems of oppression at play that exacerbate imposter syndrome feelings, especially within marginalized groups of people. So it gets at this concept that, like, if you have never seen anyone who looks like you experience success, you might wonder if you deserve the success, or if you, are worthy of that success. And so
mm.
imposterization just kind of takes the emphasis and the focus off of the individual human experiencing imposter syndrome feelings, and recognizes that there's a larger, bigger picture happening that creates those feelings.
No, that's it's so well said, Sonia. It reminds me sometimes it's a kind of a parallel, but sometimes in medicine we've gone from the language saying a diabetic to a person with diabetes, right? That this is
Yes.
more not just defines you that I am an imposter syndrome. I'm an imposter, really. I
Hmm.
have imposter versus like, oh, I'm going through this normal process that most people experience at some point, maybe not feeling adequate enough. It doesn't mean it's defining me. It's actually we're normalizing that.
Hmm.
And one way I see a lot, it's maybe a little subtle or different. I wonder if you see this when you've trained people. Part of coach training programs people don't know is that you actually coach each other. You have
Yeah.
to be a client to really understand the impact, because on paper you're like, this is, and then you experience, you're like, wow, I
Yes.
see how powerful it is, right?
Hmm.
And inevitably in these triads that I'm mentoring, someone will say, well, how could I be a health coach if I struggle with weight? How could I be a health coach if I have anxiety, depression? How could I be a health coach if I X, Y, and Z here?
Hmm.
Right. And I tell people, you'll be a better health coach because you realize how hard it really is.
Yes.
Right. Health coaches, your job is not to be an influencer or a model. I think people sometimes, that's where the Instagram coaches people call them, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
do what I do, eat kale and do yoga. We all have,
Hmm.
there's no one path to well-being. And, a lot of people while I'm training, they say, well, I want to be in the flow. I want to be in the flow. I go, it takes skill to be in the flow. You can't be in flow the
Hmm.
first day you pick up the guitar. You got to
Mm-mm.
be there for a little bit. Right. And that part of it, there's a guitarist who I follow who had a great saying about practice. He said, if it sounds really good when you're practicing, maybe you're not practicing the right way.
Hmm.
That it's okay for us to be, not always to be smooth. And even with your clients, I tell people, you can be fully transparent with your client what you're doing.
Hmm.
Coaching is not a magic trick. It's not something that happens behind closed doors. And again, to know who is a coach right now in the audience, think about when you were in the coach training program or when you get coached. I get coached weekly. I know what they're doing. It's
Hmm.
still effective. So my analogy here for medicine is knowing how insulin works doesn't make it stop working.
Yeah.
When you learn how oxygen and breathing works, doesn't all of a sudden stop working for you. There's a neuroscience of behavior change. And I think actually the transparency of that can really help that therapeutic bond. And
Mhm.
even when we mess up, so what if I mess up in session? What if I say that judgment word? I say, good job. I go, I've done it before. I say, you know what? Let me take that back. That was judgmental. Let me try again.
Mhm.
We are people too, right? So that you don't have to be perfect to be the perfect match for someone to serve them.
Absolutely. Yes, and I think just bringing an element of humility into those conversations can be really powerful to be able to say like, I don't like how I said that. I'm going to try again. What a human
Yeah.
moment to have. I always used to tell the coaches I was training that coaching is somewhat like improv. Like you pick up the
Mm,
phone in a corporate coaching environment and you have no idea who you're calling. You have no idea what you're going to talk about. And your job really is to say yes and to rely on your coaching skills and rely on what you know about behavior change and rely on your soft skills. I wish there was a better term for that, but soft skills and
yeah.
coaching presence really kind of lay the foundation for a meaningful conversation. If you can help a person feel safe and seen and acknowledged and heard, you are a long way into being able to help that person make a powerful and a meaningful change.
Yeah. All these questions, frankly, just gave me goosebumps because the power of coaching, really. And,
Yeah.
something someone told me, and there's some great comments I'm going to read out a second from the comment thread. Please keep them coming, the questions coming. Um, Someone I was training said, Diego, stop trying to solve their problems for them. It's not your job anymore.
Yes. Mhm.
And I was like, but I'm here to help. And yeah, you are helping. What does the evidence show help? The evidence shows that letting them solve for themselves with the right support and guidance is way more effective than you telling them. And the power of pause in coaching as well. It's space there. Some of the biggest ahas I've seen clients have has not been from something I said, but from, frankly, when I was training one time, a client said something. I was trying to figure out, oof, how do I reflect that? What questions do I ask? And I was trying to formulate in my mind. It took me 2 or 3 seconds. And as I took a breath in to start my how question, the client started talking, and I luckily closed my mouth. And I would have never foreseen what they had, that insight they had,
Oh, it's
right?
so
And
powerful when that happens.
yeah, and this summer I went to a conference. Dr. Stephen Miller, who wrote one of the books on MI, said if we say all the ahas for the client, we don't leave anything for them to discover, right? And that's what a different paradigm that is. So really inspiring conversation here. To be very frank with you.
Yeah, I think something that you said stood out to me there, which is that, like, don't try to solve your clients' problems, don't try to fix anything for them. I facilitate a grief group for pet loss at a local animal
Mm,
shelter, and one thing that I notice when I'm in that grief group support, like, facilitator role is that I often kinda catch myself, my inner dialogue being like, "What am I possibly going to say next? How can I help here? What should I do? How can I take their pain away?" And that's how I know that I'm totally outside of the scope of my role as coach and
mm,
facilitator. When I hear my own imposter syndrome start talking to me and start, making this assumption that I need to solve the problem or fix the issue or take away their pain, that's how I know that I'm not operating within my coaching scope. And that's how I know that I need to take a deep breath and say, what's your takeaway? Something like that, where
yeah,
instead of me trying to come up with something smart or interesting to say, that I leave it up to the client. And that is hard. It is hard to do. Coaching is a skill.
yeah,
And it is something that, unfortunately, a lot of people use the word coaching when it's not really actually describing what they're doing. But coaching in and of itself is absolutely a skill, and it's a skill that takes a lot of practice and a lot of time to really hone.
yeah. Something you said there too. I think a big learning we can all take from that is that when we notice these things happening, where we say, "Hey, I'm not doing the right thing," it could also very easily to like, "I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not being good." That
Yes.
imposterization and then more stress. But if we can be like our clients and we notice that it's not working, that's a signal to change our behavior, not to judge us, right? Like, oh, every time I notice that I'm doing that, that's just a signal to bring it back to the client. And I'm not a bad person or a bad coach or a failure for doing this. And I also want to normalize the difficulty of coaching, right? That
Yeah.
this is not how our brain works in every other setting. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe if you've been coached for a long time, you start incorporating into your daily life, and most of us have, but it's not how we've lived our life for decades before we started coaching. So why would all of a sudden we think differently? Change takes time. The same, our clients' change takes time. So does ours to do it, and we won't get there without practicing. The fact that we had one lecture in MI motivational interviewing in medical school for 40 minutes. First of all, it's way too little, but you can't
Mhm.
learn it on a PowerPoint. You have to
Right.
experience it. And your analogy of improv, I might borrow that because I used to say it's a performance. I don't mean it's not
Yeah.
real, but some jobs you turn in things. Here's my book report. Here's the market research analysis. You do it
Mhm.
beforehand and you turn in a polished thing. Coaching in other jobs where you are, it starts at this time, ends at this time, and we're not sure what's going to happen. There's a lot of variables there. Can be stressful. You never
Mhm.
know, and you're dealing with someone's feelings, your own feelings too, and just normalize that. Um, I think if I add a thought to this, it just came to mind. A lot of when I see people training, if the client has a very clear trajectory, it was they met their goals, they did all stuff. The coach feels really great with themselves. They,
Mhm.
and they, and then if the client has a lot of ambiguity, confusion, uncertainty, failure, the coach is like, oh, it was a hard session, it was a bad session. Like it was a valid session,
Yes.
because as long as a client had inside momentum, they're some weeks are better than other weeks. It's not a reflection on you. And there's so much there. I think that constant work on imposterization and normalize those feelings that we are not there to there's no I in coach, I would say, right? Take ourselves
Yeah.
a little more out of the equation. No ego when you're serving.
Totally. I think it's also really important to normalize that even when you are a person like myself with 13 years of experience across like private practice, small business, corporate wellness, like all sorts of places, I've trained hundreds of coaches, I've done thousands of coaching sessions. I'm still learning. I
Mm,
still have those moments where I catch myself wanting to fix something or wanting to change something. And again, that's where my own, I need to catch myself in those moments, take a deep breath, and kind of pivot, kind of remember what my coaching role is. And I think that normalization, just like helping people realize that you're never done. You're never done learning. You never
yeah.
arrive at being a coach. You are always learning and growing and changing and evolving. And that's how it should be. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice segue to continuing education, but I'm gonna add one more thing before
Yeah.
that. Someone one time, when a client of mine, I want to share this with the audience, who said, "We're having a session." Goes, "Oh, Diego, your life must be so easy. You know how the brain works." I have a neuroscience
Hmm.
background before, and I said, "Listen, no one for sure knows exactly how the brain works. We know much. We know, we think we know a lot. We know some. Even that is kind of questionable. And there's so much more we don't know."
Hmm.
I said, even if I was somehow given this divine knowledge of how all brains work, which every brain's different, so they all work a little differently. But let's
Hmm.
say somehow this hypothetical world, this came up. Um, it doesn't mean my brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Knowing of negative thought traps doesn't mean I don't have negative thought traps, right? Knowing of imposterization doesn't mean I won't ever have those feelings of imposterization.
Hmm.
Yet the knowledge, just like you said earlier, if I know this, I'm doing the thing that I don't want to be doing, can help me change my behavior towards where I want
Exactly.
to go. And it's a constant redirection, a constant learning. So speaking of constant learning, Sonia, I know you're really passionate about helping coaches both take the exam and
Mhm.
continue on. I'd be curious what's kind of your passions there, how you got started, and if you can speak a little bit of your experience there and helping coach along the way on their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really fortunate to have an incredible job for 3.5 years as the training manager of a corporate wellness team that had about 300 health coaches on it. And during that time, I was in charge of the new hire training program. So I created, the board approved training program and then delivered it to about 200 coaches and was also in charge of the continuing education for that organization. And I loved everything about just getting to train new coaches, bring them into the team and kind of help them really understand how to coach just in general, but also how to coach within the framework of the company I was working for. And then getting to be a person who just got to like nerd out on interesting coaching things every month and deliver that information to the team was a dream. It was a wonderful job. And so that's kind of how I got my start. I got lucky getting to have that opportunity pretty young in my career and did it for a while and really loved the opportunity to just kind of sit with people in their learning experience. So much about coaching is pretty aligned with education, with learning, with understanding how people's brains work. And I just thought it was a really cool and curious experience to just always get to learn more about my students. And
Mhm.
I always felt like when I was teaching my students, I was learning along the way. So in fast forward a few years, I'm now off in private practice on my own, and I'm working on building a library of continuing education units. They're in the board's hands at the moment. So hopefully we'll get some good news soon. And I also run a prep course for people sitting for the board exam. So that's something that I also had the pleasure of doing within my corporate career, was getting to help prepare coaches for the board exam. And when I went off on my own, I knew that that was something I wanted to continue to offer to people, because I think, like you said, you're used to taking exams that last 2 days long, but a lot of people who are in this industry are, people who maybe haven't had that experience, maybe have never gone to a prometric location, maybe have never even heard of a prometric location.
Mm,
And so the board exam prep course that I offer is far less about teaching the content. It's far more about helping you prepare for the test. So helping you think through the nuances of your own study plan. What does it look like to build a study plan that works for you, your schedule, and your brain? What does it look like to prepare for the day of the test? Thinking about,
mm,
like, driving there ahead of time, what you're wearing, what you're eating for breakfast, like those little details that
yeah.
you might not think about, and it might not sound like they really matter, but they can make or break you passing that test. And that test costs $500, so it's really
Yeah.
good to walk into it being prepared and knowing what you're in for. And then, of course, there's also in my course a practice exam, a section on helping people understand how to read the questions and kind of think through all of the different answers that are in front of them, as well as just kind of some general, like, study habits and test taking tips and things like that. So that's been a
Yeah.
really rewarding thing to get to offer to people.
Sonia, I know you mentioned this now in our talk earlier too, that like it sounds like the way you create this course about teaching people for the board exam is like a coach would. It's not about here's information, here's my
Yes.
study plan, 6 weeks you have to do 9 to 3. That here's information, but how are you going to apply this? And how do you study? What do you know about yourself? And
Hmm.
also those practical skills that seem like they're not related to the content, but are related to your performance on the exam.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So, and there's someone in the comment who mentioned that they're studying for the exam soon. So I would definitely contact Sonia for help, because again, she's a wealth of knowledge there and beyond the scope, beyond just what's on those multiple choice questions. And being privy to see what that's like in the back room, part of helping this design is that there are people on the boards whose job is to just be their PhDs, and I'm probably messing the term up here, but basically exams, how
Yeah.
exams are created. And I want to say something to everyone who's taken an exam, whether they passed or not passed. I've talked to people who've been in both categories.
Hmm.
And this is coming from someone who's this doctorate, who's there, helps write all the exams or oversee it. First of all exams are imperfect by nature. It's impossible to test everyone's knowledge by just taking a sample size questions. There's lots of biases for marginalized communities, how they're written, if you have any learning or reading disabilities. There's many, many biases with tests. So exams are imperfect by nature.
Hmm.
They will never be a good exam, or perfect exam, better said. Um, Yet he was saying, right now his name escapes me. Sorry, I should remember, but he was saying, I sit in all the exams. People who write the cardiology boards, the nephrology boards, the GI boards. He goes, your boards are the hardest ones. And you think, well, because it's how do you check for knowledge of presency in coaching?
Totally.
How do you write a question around this art and the science and how they integrate? It's not, diabetes is what's the hemoglobin A1C cutoff? Is it 5.6, 6.5? Right? It is, there's so much nuance in the practice of coaching. How do you make this 3D work into 2 dimensions? I'll say to people too, we're testing on those exams, your knowledge of the skills, but they're actually not testing your skills in practice, right? You're not actually seeing someone reflect in real time. It's, do you know what reflections are? So clear, in order to do the skills, to know the skills are, but it's not a one-to-one correlation. So I want to say for everyone who I've met in the past who, hasn't passed the exam and they feel, hey, that imposterization we talked about earlier, exams that are on a curve by definition will have a certain
Hmm.
population percentage fail by definition. Every year that any board exam that's on a curve is created, some people will fail, whether it's in national board health coaching, nephrology, ICU. it's kind of intrinsic, is not a reflection on you. Yet it is important to prepare for these exams so that, again, showing the homework, and the bigger this community is, not only that you individually will have better opportunities for employment, for connection with healthcare organizations, your potential clients, but also the bigger this organization is, the more leverage we can have, more awareness overall.
Yes.
So yeah, Sonia, thank you for the work you do, because I know people who haven't taken it because that barrier feels too big, and it sounds like you're really helping break down the barrier on an individual level for them.
Yeah, I think something that is worth saying is that I am not a natural test taker. I
Mm,
walked into that test feeling like there's no way I'm going to pass this. Like
mm,
I'm a good coach, I know what I'm doing, but it was September 2017. I took it on like I think it was day 1 or day 2 of the test. So like I didn't even get like my friends telling me like, "Oh, this is what was on it. Here's what it was like." I walked in
yeah.
totally blind, knowing nothing. And I walked out being like, I don't know. And I've carried that experience with me. I created the course that I've created, like you said, from a coaching perspective, and not from the perspective of someone who's like an expert test taker, but someone who understands how to pass a test, even though I'm not an expert test taker.
Yeah.
And I always say that the answer to every question on that test is it depends. And your job as a coach is to figure out what does it depend on, and
Mm,
what are they asking for in the question, and being able to read the question well is a skill, and it's a skill that you can learn. And like you said,
yeah.
it's not assessing your practical knowledge, but something that can be really helpful is like pretending that it is, pretending that you are about to respond, about to have that improv moment where you have to figure out how would I respond to this question, and being able to choose the answer that's most similar to how you as a real intuitive human being would respond can be a helpful way to kind of ease anxiety and to
Mm.
be a strategy that helps people who aren't necessarily natural test takers.
Yeah, and even mindset, I mean, mindset
Yeah.
shift. Say, "Oh, this
Mhm.
exam is so long." It's so be like, "Oh, I get the opportunity to brush up on my skills and see where I'll
Yeah,
learn what this question will make my brain think about." And
totally.
I've got a feeling it might go a little over time. That's okay. We're recording this, and who has to hop off, we'll have the recording up.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the next step after you take your exam, because
Yeah.
I, like you, I'm an academic. I love teaching people at these universities and helping the theory of coaching, all we talked about. But then there's a reality of like, now what? How do I start how do I do this? And you created something very special. Actually, I know we're in process of hopefully getting approved. But to me, I
Yeah.
thought it was really showing your passion for helping coaches kind of those next steps. I'm wondering, maybe you could talk about what you're creating, and then I'll take it from there.
Absolutely, yes. So we're in the process of creating a 1 credit hour CEU on how to start and manage and grow your coaching practice with Vibely. So there's a wait list for it, and maybe Miriam can drop the link for the wait list. As soon as it's ready, we will let you know. But it's going to be a continuing education credit that just breaks down how you can use Vibely to get started, or how you can use Vibely to manage and grow what you've already built. So one of the things that I was so excited about when I saw Vibely and learned about the platform was, again, the way that it's first of all so intuitive and so helpful for people who maybe don't want to take the time to set up all their own systems by themselves. It integrates everything you possibly need to run a coaching practice. And so we're going to just kind of break down the process of like how to get started, how to build your own profile, and how to kind of get the word out about your own profile on Vibely through the CEU opportunity. So that will be forthcoming, and hopefully we'll get some people on the wait list for it.
Yeah. And to me as an educator, I was like, how great. Let's see how different brain processes and
Yeah.
teaches this, right? And so to me, it's inspiring. I say I want to collaborate with our coaches. Our coaches are our partners. They give us feedback for how to improve the platform, what their clients need. And frankly, this idea came from Sonia. This was an idea I had. And so I was like, felt really honored that seeing that, how can we help people out in general? Because we know people struggle that next step. And we try to design that business in a box, kind of
Hmm.
just to get started. And some feedback we've had also is we're also optimizing our SEO. So hopefully
Yeah.
people can type in your name and Vibely, or your name and the program you have, because you can have unlimited programs. We talked about earlier, so you have 5 different kind of populations you tend to serve or things you work in.
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of coaches say we'll have to niche down for marketing, and it makes sense. We'll have one whole podcast just on this.
Hmm.
At the same time, most coaches have multiple things they want to serve, but sometimes are limited because having to focus only on one thing. And our idea is
Yeah.
that if you can follow your passions and multiple ones of them, maybe it's not half and half, but that 10% of your population that you serve, you still enjoy that variety for yourself, right? So, to anyone listening, what I want to say is that we want your feedback, right? That like this is created with all the community and your clients involved, right? And I think that's why I wanted to invite Sonia on, because I think it was a great example of something that I would not have thought of, frankly, and just shows that like how can we all collaborate work together. So that's kind of what the community is at the core, well-being and health. So that should be the core of a coaching kind of platform. I do want to call, and so if any of the things you want to say, I want to review some of these comments here and
Yeah.
questions that we have as well. So a few. So Dr. Mohammed, great to see you. He said a few great comments, but one he said, when people ask what kind of doctor I am, I say I'm a listening doctor. Right? Very, very nicely said. Someone thanked you for the board exam kind of information. Hey Cecilia, thanks for efficient posturization. Again, we're always learning. Cecilia has a book actually coming out. She's giving our podcast. She wrote health coaching and motivational interviewing. I think it's November 7th. We'll have that podcast. And so really excited for her and Patty to be on there.
Awesome.
Rebecca Himes, another, someone had the pleasure of mentoring at Duke. She said, Sonia, this is a nice connection you identified between imposterization phenomenon and social cognitive theory. And she said, quote, if no one else like me has done this, how can I?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe I want to pause here for a second, because got again a little goosebumps that I think the magic of coaching is in diversity of everything. The topics covered, but also the kind of people who can coach.
Yes.
I really value that we can widen the pipeline for our clients, but also the people who are training to become coaches. It has a
Mm-hmm.
lower barrier. There's still barriers. We're trying to lower
Yes.
those. I know a program that I'm working with who's doing half price just because to lower the barriers. Open source wellness, they really try to lower those barriers. So how can we have the community of coaches reflect the communities they serve? And there's a lot of power in saying that provider speaks my language quite literally, or is
Mm-hmm.
bilingual like me and speaks Spanglish,
Mm-hmm.
or has a similar background because they're also a doctor, or also from this community, or they understand what it's like to be a first generation or grow up in this place, right? So the power of partnership is such an important part of that coaching relationship, and therefore the change that happens, right? And so if they see more people being in well-being, they can say well-being is not just for a certain population.
Yes.
Well-being and optimization can be for everyone, even though the way we get there is different, and the definition of well-being can be different for people too. There's not, I don't know if it was you and I or someone else. This is kind of more advanced coaching. I think maybe it was Cecilia who mentioned that sometimes people learn these programs, but then they kind of use these skills to get them to do what they think should be well-being. But coaching
Mm-hmm.
the client defines well-being, right? So let me see here a few other, I want to make sure, get any other questions here. Cecilia said, am I at the root of this belief system that our clients are capable of solving their own problems? Like we were talking about earlier. Dr. Mohammed, coaching is not direction, giving orders or following orders. It's a dance together, and let the coaches take the driver's seat as well as the coach seat. Okay, sorry, the passenger seat, and navigate together to reach their goals. Dr. Mohammed, I've heard the analogy of dancing. I added to that. I say coaching is a dance. The client's leading the dance, but the coach is keeping us on the dance floor. We're you decide what dance we're doing, but I'm gonna make sure we stay in that balance, right? Well, that said, I think I covered most of the comments. If there's any more questions, I think Miriam is posting where you can find Sonia's both her Vibely profile, her personal website, information on the continuing education credits regarding Vibely, but also imposterizations and other things. And Sonia, I want to thank you for not only being part of the community, but for the work you've done beforehand and your passion for education, helping others be their best selves and not stop. So really been an honor and privilege to have you on today. And thank you for Cecilia, it takes two to tango. Thank you, Cecilia. So thank you so much for being on today, and looking forward to continue working together. Any last minute words as you sign off here?
No, thank you so much for having me today. And thanks to everyone who joined. Looking forward to connecting.
Thank you, community. We'll see you in next week for our next or in 2 weeks for our next podcast. Same time, same place. Take care. Bye-bye.